The second piece that we're discussing today are the 4 canopic jars, which were also found in KV55. These 4 jars were also discovered by Theodore Daves in KV55 in the year 1907. They are all made out of alabaster, known as chess in hieroglyphics, quarried from Hat Noob near Tel El Amarna, nowadays Ilminia Governorate. This type of urns are mistakenly known as canopic jars. However, they are supposed to be given the name vestral jars, due to the fact that their main function was to keep the organs that came out of the abdominal cavity of the deceased during the process of mummification, so as to protect the body from decaying and from being destroyed. They were given this name mistakenly due to the fact that a Greek sailor during the Greco-Roman era, whose name was Canopus, was lost in the sea and had landed in a small town or village known as Canoop near Abu Qir nowadays. This man had healing abilities and was able to heal the king who was bitten by a scorpion. And so, as a reward, the king ordered that Canopus would be deified and identified with god Osiris to become Osiris Canopus. This god was worshipped in the form of an urn whose stopper takes the form of a human head. So when Egyptologists first discovered the ancient Egyptian tombs, they found inside them these urns with toppers that take the form of the human head. They called them canopic jars, thinking that they were connected to Osiris Canopus. But later, after examining the contents of these jars, they knew that they had nothing to do with Osiris Canopus, but they were connected with mummification and its process. Nevertheless, until today, these jars are known as the so-called canopic jars. Concerning the development of these so-called canopic jars, they made their first appearance during the Old Kingdom, and the earliest ones known were from the reign of King Khafren of the 4th dynasty, as they were discovered in the tomb of Hetep-Heres, and this was considered to be the first time or the first attempt where mummification started. The canopic jars started to take the form of an urn whose topper took either the dome or flat shape. Later on, during the first intermediate period and until the end of the New Kingdom, they started to take the human heads, and they were connected to the 4 sons of Horus as well. During the New Kingdom, these human heads were specifically carrying the facial features of their owners, to indicate that the organs inside the jars belong to him. By the end of the New Kingdom, until the late period, the stoppers of the canopic jars took the form of the 4 sons of Horus themselves. The 4 sons of Horus are Mesti, who takes the human head and took care of the liver; Hapi, who took the baboon's head and took care of the lungs; Duamut-F, who takes the jackal head and took care of the stomach; and finally Qibh Sinu-F, who takes the shape of the falcon head and protects the intestines. During the 3rd intermediate period, the canopic jars were placed empty inside the tombs, due to the fact that the process of mummification slightly changed. The organs that were taken out of the abdominal cavity in order to be mummified were actually placed back into the body, and so the jars had nothing to house anymore. However, they kept putting them among the funerary equipment of the deceased, as they were considered to be an important part of the funerary equipment. During the 25th and 26th dynasties, the technique of mummification changed again, and the organs were placed inside the canopic jars that were placed inside the tombs. From the 27th dynasty down till the Ptolemaic era, the canopic jars were demolished. The canopic jars were housed inside what is known as a canopic chest, which is a box divided from inside into 4 compartments to house the jars. The canopic chest was usually decorated by the 4 mourner goddesses Isis, Nephthys, Neith, and Serqet. These goddesses were made to protect the canopic chest from outside, while the 4 sons of Horus would protect the jars from inside. As for the description of these 4 canopic jars that are exhibited at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, they all take the same shape of a long urn whose upper part is totally bulging and closed by a stopper that takes the form of a female royal head from the Amarna period, whose identity is still disputed. She is shown wearing a heavy hair wig known as the Nubian hair wig, which was usually worn by Kea. This wig consists of curls that cover the sides of the face and the ears. She is represented with an elongated face following the third phase of art, the modified truth. Also, the forehead is covered by a thick fringe, and in the middle appears a hole which was once housing a uraeus sign of royalty. She is represented with a delicate face, with a pointed chin and protruding lips. Her eyes and eyebrows are completely hollowed and were once inlaid with obsidian, traces of which could still be seen. Moving downwards, we could see that she's represented wearing a collar made out of several layers and ending with beads. The frontal part of the jar was once inscribed, however, today is coarse and rough, since the inscriptions were totally removed, and that is why the identity of the owner is under dispute. At first, it was believed that the owner of the jar was in fact Queen T, when Theodore Daves has attributed KV55 to Queen T. However, after Elliot Smith had examined the skeletal remains in KV55 and believed that it belonged to Semenech Kara, the jars were also attributed to Semenech Kara. In 2010, and when Zahi Hawass made the examination on the skeletal remains and proved that the owner died at the age of 40, attributing the skeletal remains and the anthropoid coffin to Akhenaten, the jars also belonged to Akhenaten. However, they were originally made for Queen Kea, the secondary wife of Akhenaten, who died during his 16th regnal year. But due to the sudden death of Akhenaten, he actually used the anthropoid coffin and the canopic jars of Kea. These canopic jars were also placed inside a canopic chest, which was originally made out of alabaster. However, only few parts of the alabaster remain, but while the rest of the canopic chest was totally restored. This canopic chest is topped by a lid that takes the form of the perwer, followed by a cavetto corneus. As for its body, it is decorated by 4 representations of Ra Horokhti with outstretched wings, replacing the 4 mourner goddesses Nephthys, Isis, Neith, and Serqet, as during the Amarna period Akhenaten denied the existence of all these gods, and so they were replaced by the 4 representations of Ra Horokhti with outstretched wings, to protect the contents of the canopic chest. At the bottom of the chest are representations of the teeth knot and the jet pillars that originally belonged to Isis and Osiris. However, in this case, they are only made for decorative purposes. Lastly, we could say that this is a very important piece to us today, as it gives us an example of canopic jars during the Amarna period.